But I think people want to be on the winning team, right? When you go someplace...
Unless you're a Bears fan.
Or any Chicago Bears. But if you are feeling like, wow, this place is put together, they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Notice these little things, and it all builds up to this vibe that you have, like, this is exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Welcome to the DiscipleSHIFT Podcast. DiscipleSHIFT is a ministry of St. John the Evangelist Parish. With DiscipleSHIFT, we're hoping to bring you into some of the conversations we have as a team. Now, these are conversations of parish leadership and renewal. They're conversations about what we go through, some of the issues that we're struggling with, some of the questions that we're having. You'll hear some of our successes and some of our setbacks. Hopefully, in sharing these conversations with you, you'll be able to take something away from them to improve your ministry and to grow the impact that you're having at your parish. Now, with these conversations, we're going to have different people coming on board to just explore various aspects within our parish. On today's episode, we have our pastor, Father Sammy Maletta, and Chris Ziegelhofer. Chris Ziegelhofer is our HR coordinator, and she also oversees parishioner engagement. Welcome to DiscipleSHIFT.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Will.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Now, this is the first episode of hopefully many. We figured we'd kick off with welcome. What does it mean to be a welcoming parish?
Yeah.
So, Father, could you share a little bit of the vision behind that?
Yeah, I think we set a goal that we want to have outrageous hospitality. And so we understand that hospitality begins the moment someone drives into our parking lot, so that the grounds are beautiful, the landscape is done well, the parking lot itself is well maintained. It's clear that where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do. People don't want to go someplace if they're feeling uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So when they get to the body of the church or they get to the outside of the church, we want people out there welcoming them, making sure they feel at home. We tell our greeters that we want them to love on the people that come through.
Mm-hmm.
We typically try to look for greeters who like to throw parties, who enjoy people and do that. So you come in, you're welcomed. Once you get in the narthex, you're welcomed again. Before you enter in the body of the church, there's a third person that should be welcoming you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you come in to the foyer of the church or the narthex, we want everything to look clean, crisp, clear, where the bathrooms are, everything that there might be any human needs that need to be taken care of. We also have in our narthex area what we call the sacred grounds.
Mm-hmm.
So after Mass, we have coffee and donuts.
Coffee bar, yeah.
Yeah, coffee bar. So yeah, it's all those things that make a difference, that make that people feel, wow, I really am welcome. I really do matter. It's not like when I went on a sabbatical a few years ago, I would go from church to church. And I can remember going to this one church and having nobody say hi to me.
Mm.
I saw that people that knew each other, they were embracing in the aisles and they were talking. They knew I wasn't supposed to be there. They knew that I didn't belong in a certain sense, but they made me feel like I didn't belong. There's no one that came up and said, I'm glad you're here. Or,
Right, that you're visiting.
You're visiting or where are you from or anything like that. So we want to encourage people to connect as much as possible, just as they come into the building.
The way you start Mass as well, welcome really as a focus on visitors.
Right. So we tell people that, welcome, especially if you haven't been in church for a while.
Yeah.
Some people, when they come, we don't realize this because we do this all the time. But if somebody hasn't been in church for a long time, they come in, they're feeling like everybody knows they haven't been in church for a while.
Yeah.
They don't, they see the connections. And so we want to make sure they feel welcome. And also, we have an unusual number of non-Catholics who worship with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always start Mass by saying welcome and identifying those two groups and saying it's a real honor for us to share our worship experience with you. And then we do what we call the meet and greet, where people turn to one another, introduce themselves if they don't know each other's names, and then find a prayer partner. We want to emphasize that we're not here for ourselves, but we're here to pray for somebody else. And so we find prayer partners. It's really lovely to see people praying right there on the spot with people. But it's also been very edifying for me that over a time that we've been doing this, that people have now formed relationships, friends. with people that they would have sat in the pew and never known who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And now they have coffee with each other. They go to each other's homes. They worry and pray for each other. It's a beautiful thing.
There's a lot in there that we're going to unpack,
Okay.
especially the starting with the basics. When you drive up onto our campus, what kind of thought do we put into how we present ourselves from that moment when somebody just pulls up? Could you share a little bit of that?
Well, we have an extensive entrance, right? There's only one entrance and one exit to come into our property. And so when you come in, we have the whole thing flanked with beautiful flowers. It's just almost like it's shaped like an embrace. So it's like arms coming out to you as you come in.
I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
Did you think of that?
No.
I've never thought
And I've never heard
If
you
you're
say
the one,
that.
if you're the one who has to design the plant, you know that's what that's for.
Well, this is what I love about having these episodes. Like, I never knew that. So
Yeah, I wanted
Yeah,
people
but you
to
can
feel.
see it now that you say
now that he mentions it, yeah.
So, and again, it's not like, oh, look, they got the arms that are welcoming. It's just subconscious. You feel, all right, come.
Okay.
So, and the beautiful flowers and the landscaping, especially in the summertime when all the hydrangeas are blooming. We've planted a lot of pink and white hydrangeas. It's kind of like a theme throughout. And then every entrance has beautiful flowers. We have the beautiful plaza with a fountain in it that people can walk through. And we have a couple shrine statues there. And then in the front of the church, we have this magnificent Madonna with these tin towers that we fill with flowers that drip down and really look impressive.
Right. And you had a lot of parishioners help you this year as well,
I
didn't
did.
you?
I mean, years past, I'm getting old. Years past, I did it myself with the maintenance crew, but now we've invited people, and it was really, really helpful. We got a lot done. And then also, I think that they now take more interest.
And pride in it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think for
we put a lot of resources into that.
Yeah.
Not only just time, but also financially. Even though we have a whole process of buying flowers that we plant from like
seed.
little starters that are inexpensive. We still have to. We're talking about clearly over 1,500 flats of flowers.
Right.
Are required, and I think it's an investment because, again, it makes people feel welcome.
Yeah.
And then our church is a little bit different because we're attached to the shrine. So we get 250,000 visitors a year.
It's the Shrine of Christ Passion.
Yeah. So we have all these people coming. It's not unusual for us on a Sunday to have a bus pull up full of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's break that down a little bit, because for most parishes, they don't either have the grounds or the facilities that we have to apply these principles the way that we have. So when you say flowers, when you say the way that the drive was constructed, what are some of the principles behind that maybe somebody...
I can tell you some things I've seen that I think are not helpful.
Okay.
So I've been to parishes where there's some landscaping and the weeds have grown so high you can barely see the plants.
Yeah.
That says something about that parish, doesn't it? When you walk in, it's kind of sterile. Not every church has a large narthex like we do. But even as you come in, there should be something beautiful, something welcoming. The other thing that is really disappointing, and I've been in so many different churches, you go to like funerals or different events, is the churches are filthy. They're not kept clean. You're looking at a statue and you want to put your finger in it, the dust is so much.
Right.
Or you look and it's not maintained. I remember going to one parish for a funeral and sitting there, and the whole time the funeral was going on, the exit sign kept flashing on and off, on and off. And I was like, so maybe he doesn't know that. So I said to the pastor, I don't know if you noticed, but that light, he said, oh yeah, that's been happening for years. And we get around to fix it. Years. Sunday after Sunday, service after service. And some guys just don't see that. It takes, if you maintain anything that you have, it says something. You drive a car that's always clean and clean inside and outside, and people notice that.
Sure.
But they also notice if it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
So why is that different for church? People come in and it's overgrown weeds. There's nothing of beauty. And let's face it, we built our church when I was guided a lot by a book called Ugly as Sin.
Ugly is sin?
Ugly as Sin.
Okay.
It was a whole thing about why Catholic churches are built so ugly and how to avoid that. And I think we succeeded in doing that. But there's not a lot of architectural, unless you're talking about a really old church, that has a lot of architectural beauty to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to do different things to make people feel welcome. You know, like if you drive down a city or a town and they've got flowers hanging on the outside in the business area, go downtown Chicago and see the magnificent flowers.
Yeah.
Right.
How beautiful. It's just appealing. It's just attractive. Now, there's a lot of resources going into that,
Sure.
but it makes a difference.
But even the bare minimum, if the pastor maybe isn't as good at recognizing that kind of thing, like with the sign, maybe they find somebody in their parish, a retail person who's really used to looking
It's
at that and
hardly
asking them
any
to check it out.
parish that I've ever been in that doesn't have people in it that like to garden.
We've got an awesome art and environment team,
Yeah.
right? Those volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
they're able to see things and bring their creative energy to it and
Right.
really beautify the place.
And I have a priest friend. This is another thing I would say. I have a priest friend who feels that he's the only one that can do these sort of things. He controls it. And I have found in time that even like this year, having people come in, I had to.
That was hard for you. You were a little resistant to it at first.
It was hard. It was hard because it wasn't done exactly the way I wanted it to be. But in the end, no one knew the difference.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So, I mean, it is something I think that.
Well, and it got done, and you got other people involved
Right.
in the ministry.
Exactly. And then I think that a lot of guys, especially with art and environment, you know, we have a very large church, and you can't fill that church like you could a small church because you can put 100 like poinsettias at Christmas time and it still looks like nothing's there.
Yeah.
And it's like the same thing with when we have services. If we have a funeral in that big church instead of the day chapel, you put 150 people, it feels like it's empty.
It's empty.
Right. Yes, for
So
sure.
the same way with art and environment. So our art and environment people are very skilled at finding like accents. I don't know what you call it, but they focus on certain things that stand out instead of trying to cover the whole thing with.
Right.
But I think any parish, again, if the priest delegates that and says, hey, I need somebody to help me with this, or let's get this done. I know one parish in our diocese that has a garden club, and that's their job. They put the flowers out, they design everything.
Even something like you mentioned, you go into other churches, and we could be guilty of that ourselves if we're not careful. You walk into their narthex, and there's just posters and flyers and pamphlets, and when I walk into a church, I kind of want to get a sense of what the community is about.
Right.
What is it you want me to walk away with? What is the mission, and how can you strike me with it? So the example I like to use is when you go into the Apple store, it's so intentional from even the moment you're standing in front of the store. And then you walk in and it's laid out meticulously, intentionally, even in ways that we might even notice. So you don't really have to spend money to do these things, but even just discerning what goes in the narthex.
Right.
Just because somebody wants to post something doesn't mean they should.
When you've been in a space for so long, it just all that clutter becomes normative then, and you don't even notice it. And that's where a pastor might benefit from having a fresh set of eyes, asking a parishioner to come in and just say, hey, what do you see? You know, what's something that I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
And we were very intentional. When people come into our place, they should feel a community. I mean, it's set up for community, for people to sit down and visit and connect with each other. And again,
that was, while you're on that point, Father, we were briefly in relationship with a church not that far from us, and they didn't have a big narthex.
No.
But they used, you want to speak to that, St. Mary's, how they creatively used the back end of their church? So just thinking outside of the box. Really,
So actually, that was my idea.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I mean, I told Bishop Melzick this is what he should do,
Okay.
and they did it.
Could you explain it?
Yeah, so it's a classic church with long, narrow main aisle and then two side aisles. They have maybe that church seats about 500, I would guess, and they never had more than 110 people coming to that church. So they took out the last several rows as you come in and created a space. They put tables and
It's like they expanded their narthex. They put dividers up.
right.
Oh, okay.
And they
neat.
made a gathering area.
Yeah.
So again,
That's
just
great.
thinking outside of the box.
Those people at St. Mary's are incredibly creative.
Yeah.
I mean, they come up with some really great ideas. But that's just it. Here you have an old church with few resources, that you're not using all the space. The other thing that they did there is they started a garden. They actually won an award for garden design.
Mm-hmm.
So here is an inner city parish that, again, few resources, and yet the people have been enabled to do these wonderful things. Now when you go to that parish, there's a beautiful sign out, and that's another important thing is signage.
Yeah.
A beautiful sign out. There's flowers all over it. You feel welcome when you come into that church.
Mm-hmm.
So intentionality plays a really big
Yes.
key in all that. And understanding the why, like why do we want to do this? Why do we want to go through our space and maybe decide these things need to be pulled back? We need to spend a little more time and energy, whether it is with flowers or with signage or with whatever the case may be. I think what's really important in that instance is understanding what your mission is. How does welcome, how do we understand welcome within the context of our mission as a parish?
I think that's kind of easy. Our mission is be disciples who make disciples, the Great Commission. And so you're not going to make a disciple if you're not welcoming them.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a disciple to make a disciple. Right. So if the love of Jesus Christ resides in your heart, you cannot help but love the people who the Lord sends to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's very clear, at least in my mind, what we're trying to do by making the people feel welcomed. And again, we talk about outrageous sense of hospitality. Really want to go beyond. You know, I really want people to be like exaggerating. You know, I want these kind of like, not like me. I'm more like an introvert type person. Chris type person. Yeah, she's people, you know.
Right. I hug most of them, and when I see them,
exactly.
I'm like,
also,
hey. Yeah. So you mentioned briefly the kind of person that we look for in a greeter. You are a greeter,
right?
What's that experience like for you? What do you try to achieve?
Sure. So I like working the hospitality desk. We have a hospitality desk as well in the narthex. And so one of our staff members is there at every mass on the weekends. And so I'll usually do Sunday. So I'm there for 8 and 10. And it's just been a blessing really to work at that desk because you do get to know so many people. You know, it might be somebody that you're just seeing it the first time and you say hello to them and then strike up a conversation. And so now you get to know another person. It's funny. I always say, you know how usually you forget names as you get older?
Yeah.
I've found that working the desks helps me remember names because I'm really trying to consciously be able to call parishioners by name when I see them.
Great.
Yeah, and it's try to come up with little tricks to do it, and it's really worked. It's like I can remember so many people now, and to be able to try to greet them that way. And I think a lot of our greeters do that, and they appreciate it. Like I think when you call them by name, they're like surprised sometimes. Or
and also just think of the difference. If you go up to a desk to ask for information, and someone's behind the desk with their head down, oh, there's a form over there, fill that out. Versus somebody like you who's like smiling and engaging and showing that you're interested in this person.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
You send out that kind of energy and a message. How are they not going to be responsive?
Right.
You know?
Well, your point was well taken, Father. You're looking for people in those positions who like to throw house parties.
Right.
They like to entertain and play host, and that's naturally going to come through. You're playing to their strengths when you're inviting them on the greeter team.
Right.
Yeah.
And Louis is the person who's in charge of our greeters. And so he's asked before for us to think of like the most outgoing people that we can think of and then recommend them. And then he'll reach out and actually contact those people so that it's not just, who wants to be a greeter? Because then you might get the person that maybe isn't as friendly. But so he'll be very intentional in trying to
So that's smart on his part.
Right. Yeah.
The pressure's not on him to recruit.
Exactly.
You who are going to be extroverted anyway are going to have friends who are like-minded.
Right.
Have that energy, and then you're just passing along the name.
Exactly. And he's gotten quite a few greeters from doing that with staff members that are really outgoing.
It's also a process because not all our greeters match that.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, we still have the people who stand by the door and nod at people. Are a little gentle. And I guess there's room for all God's people, but we're really trying to emphasize more gregarious, outgoing people.
Right.
This is their strength. That's the other thing that we try to do is rely on people's strengths.
And that's a great opportunity for us because you're right. Somebody watching this, or they could come in and not be greeted. Yeah, just egg on our face.
I was getting like real nervous when we talked about this, and someone once said, I don't think it was that welcoming.
Yeah. I parked my car. I walked in. Nobody said hi. And then I had to fight over somebody to get through the pew.
Right. Because any given Sunday it could change.
Yeah, that could happen.
But our goal is very clear and our intention is very
That's
clear.
what we're working toward.
But we're just not there yet.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever be there.
Probably not.
You always have turnover. You have people that are in a ministry that need to offboard, and then you want to onboard people, and then they have to learn the culture and the techniques, so it's always fluid, right? It's a process.
Exactly.
And also there are people that just have bad days. I mean, it's very discouraging when you say, "Hi, welcome." They walk past you. You don't know hopefully they get greeted 3 times. By the 3rd time, they might respond.
Right. Yeah.
They're not used to that.
Yeah.
They're not used to that type of being treated that way. And that's good.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Father. So let's say they made it through the narthex. They got by Chris. They're entering the church. What do we try to do at that point? So they're in the church. We've got ushers. What's the goal there? Is it a point of contact? Is it just you find a place? With us Catholics, we like to sit in the back and we like our pew. And sometimes it's hugging the edge of the pew, which I'm guilty of that as well. I like to be comfortable and I want an escape route.
Father Declan and I will encourage people not to hug the pews. I don't like the fact that we have so many people coming to Mass, we have to put all these extra chairs out. So
what was us, right?
But the problem is that to make this efficient, the chairs are out before Mass begins.
Yeah.
So people gravitate to those back seats. And I don't really feel like we should tell them you can't sit here. I wish they wouldn't sit there. We can encourage them to move forward. But it's that whole thing about how we accept people where they're at. Instead of demanding they come in prepared to do it our ways. Different people. We have one gentleman who comes in wearing a hat and bringing a cup of coffee in. Not happy about that. But I don't think it's going to be. I certainly don't want. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Bless you.
I certainly don't want our ushers correcting people. That does not give the message. And I know sometimes it's really hard for our ushers. Correct. And the other thing is what
do you mean by that?
I don't think it's a place of usher. For example, the gentleman with the cup of coffee and the hat. That is a conversation that needs to be pastoral and need to be done by Father Declan or myself.
Instead of the usher saying, hey, you can't have the coffee in here or whatever.
Can't do that.
Right.
Same way with little kids. I often say when children are screaming uncontrollably in church, and we do have lots of screaming babies.
Yeah.
I'll pause. When I can see that some people in the assembly are getting irritated by that, I will pause and say, listen to this. Just listen to the crying. That's the sound of the future. And I want parents with children to feel that's okay for their kids to cry in church.
And I've had so many parents with children say how much they appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well,
because
I appreciate it because you try to do your best.
Right.
Of course.
You contain your kid.
Blood-curdling screams.
Yeah.
And people have common sense to remove the child from the assembly.
Right.
But that's a parent's call, and I don't want to do these dirty looks.
Right, right, exactly. Because sometimes it's, again, speaking from experience too, it's like at a really bad time. It's in the middle of the homily, and you're like, "Do I get up now and distract everybody that I'm getting up, or the kid is
In my previous parish, there was a lady who had 5 kids, and it seems every time that one kid got old enough, she got pregnant again, and she had this habit of sitting in the front row. And when the baby would be quiet, she started shaking the baby, rocking the baby, and the baby would start crying.
Oh, gosh.
I was trying to do my homily, and the baby's screaming and screaming. So I said, I wasn't even thinking. I just said, because we learn so much by our mistakes.
Yeah.
I whatever her name was, Beth, please. Well, she was so humiliated and so offended. Her husband, who never went to church, came in, and I thought he was going to try to punch me out because she was so devastated by this. And I thought, really, was that necessary? Do you have to go through all this at some point she's going to stop having kids. We're not going to have to worry about this. So I have to send her out of the church because of a moment of impatience on my part. You know.
You've talked before, Father, and I think we've done a series on this, a homily series about hospitality,
right?
And how you, even going back to our conversation about how you present your space and the type of people that you want greeting, and even things like the cleanliness of it. You likened it to your home. Like if you're having somebody over to your home, and even just preparing a seat for them.
Right. You did a whole Advent series on that.
Yeah, preparing for company.
We have that series
which we stole
online.
from Father Mellon's St. Benedict's at the time. I mean, it was their idea, but it worked very effectively for us. But it is so true. I mean, if you're going to invite Father Declan or myself over, do we think we're going to walk into a filthy house?
Right.
We're going to walk in where you put a TV dinner in to feed us? No.
Right.
You're going to clean. You're going to make sure that because your guest is important to you.
Yeah.
And so if one of the things that we're learning from Project Rescue that we also learned.
Rescue Project.
I don't know why.
Sorry,
it's my dyslexia.
Yeah, Father John Ricardo's Rescue Project.
Yeah. Rescue Project. Yeah. Which we also learned from Alpha, but I think it's more emphasized in the Rescue Project, is the need to show people that you care by setting the environment. So we've started the Rescue Project, and one of the requirements is there are fresh flowers on every single table.
Wow.
There are tablecloths. We're eating off of china, not paper plates. I mean, all these little things, again, does somebody consciously think this? But psychologically, they know, wow, I'm important.
Right.
I've done this. And so that's why on everything that we do, I want outrageous means to go far over what is expected.
Right. That's a really great point, because when you talked about like the weeds and the blinking sign, I mean, to subconsciously, that does say, I don't really care about you or your experience or this place, this space. So subconsciously, people may not even realize it, but that's the vibe that a parish could be giving off.
And I think people
like
always...
Yeah.
It's all about the vibes.
Right.
It is. Part of it. But I think people want to be on the winning team, right? When you go someplace...
Unless you're a Bears fan.
Or any Chicago Bears. But if you are feeling like, wow, this place is put together, they know what they're doing. Notice these little things, and it all builds up to this vibe that you have, like, this is exceptional. I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Right. And I
I
want to
don't want
raise
to be
to
part
that
of a
standard
dying
too.
community that's falling apart, that's filthy.
Yeah.
The toilets don't work, or the water fountain doesn't work, the floor is all cracked and dangerous to walk on. The sidewalk, that's a big thing. It's the sidewalks start getting cracked, and people are, it's a personal injury potential for people.
Snow, everything, all the snow removal.
The other thing I regret that I would do the church over again, I would put in heated sidewalks, because it's so hard in our climate to keep those sidewalks clean when you're in a snow blizzard.
Right.
That's if someone is looking to build or expand on their church, that's something you could take into consideration. It might be an upfront cost,
right?
But always looking at long term, because you're working on a book now with Ron Huntley, 20 plus mindset, leading with this vision of where are we going to be 20 years down the road. Look at all the savings. Something just as simple as that would present to you, where you don't have to worry about who's shoveling and who's salting and who's this and who's that. Upfront cost, heated sidewalks, long-term savings.
Right.
And that was why we have the long sidewalk into the studio, and that is heated. I won't build a sidewalk anymore unless I put.
When we say studio, we mean a 2-car garage.
You don't have to blow it. Come on.
Yeah,
They thought this was professional.
Some things you got to keep to yourself.
this is all about being transparent, Father. People would not believe how much
But
duct tape.
it looks beautiful, right? It looks like
Little
a beautiful
fantasy.
studio.
Yeah, how much duct tape we got going on right now. We talked about vibes, and that resonated with me, and I know it resonates with a lot of people. When you're in the world and you're just going about your daily life, and it's just, especially with the news and social media and your own personal things that you wrestle with, and to be able to pull up onto a church campus and just that spiritual vibe of like, this place is beautiful. I know this place has been set apart. It's for God. It makes it a lot easier to check your stuff at the door.
Right.
And let your defenses down a little bit so God can work within you. That's the thing that I really picked up being on team here from you, Father. Being intentional in these small ways, however you can, it gives you introduce that intentionality, even in the grounds, even in the space that you create. You're just giving the Holy Spirit an opportunity to work in people and on people. I mean, they can go to gardens, like they can go down to the Chicago, the Botanical Garden, if they wanted to see something like that, or they can go to the city. You mentioned the Magnificent Mile and look at beautiful architecture. But if we can do that in a space that's designated to be set apart for God.
Right.
And that's one thing, that's one thing we've lost in our church, in our tradition. Because in the past, beauty was always something important in our churches. If you go, like when I lived in Rome and you go to all these churches, you see these beautiful pieces of art. Now, they're kind of dated because they were done in the Middle Ages, but nonetheless, it was this beauty that you were looking for. We've lost that since. We use plaster statues that are mass-produced. I mean, everything in our church is crafted by an artist, not mass-produced.
And some of the stuff they're crafted by parishioners.
Yes.
Right, who have those skills.
Right.
And like we had that tabernacle project where we had to reposition our tabernacle. It's in the center of it's always been in the center of the church, but it had to get repositioned, and parishioners assisted with that. And the pride that they take, that they get to contribute to something lasting in the church is awesome. I mean, you could have easily looked at bidding it out and bringing in contractors and whatever. We'd have to budget for it. And all those other considerations come in. And could we even do the project? But if you can just tap into the congregation and have them contribute in meaningful ways like that, it changes how they come to church and how they see themselves as partners in this mission.
Sure. We had one gentleman that carved over 150 crosses that have been placed at various points in our church.
Right.
You know, the screens, the paintings done by a parishioner, the altar, the ambo, all made by parishioners.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It is. When you do a tour of the church and you tell people this, but it also, that says in and of itself, says something. This is a church where the laity and their gifts are welcomed and thrive.
You mentioned something even about like the vibe and about, being able to leave all the baggage aside. One really cool thing that you've done too is starting with a prayer before Mass, when you tell people like to unload anything that you're worried about, put aside, and you do like a really beautiful prayer. And I know people have loved that as well in the past because it does get them centered and ready.
Well,
for
it's
Mass.
like this is life, right? We have a schedule. You have kids. We got to get here, and then who's going to take him over here? Who's going to go to this ball game? Got to get to the grocery store, get this done. We have this luncheon we have to attend to.
Right.
So you're a boom, 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 right? You come into church, it's hard to get out of that mindset. You're thinking, what do I got to do today? How I got to,
Right,
so forth and so on. And it's just like the rest of our life. And when we come to church, our life needs to slow down. It's got to almost stand still. And we're here for something other than this pace that we've been keeping.
Right.
We're here for something else that's going to feed us, nourish us, and strengthen us for the week ahead.
I think that's also a great welcoming thing when you've done that.
The church that we're currently in is, I think, 11 years old?
No, I think
2012?
I think it's a little bit longer than that.
But it always hasn't. I mean, it hasn't always been there.
No, it's a new recent. It's been the last
Yeah. So I mean, this has
15
been
years.
I mean, you've been a priest for over 40 years. This is a long time coming of trying to
I
find
forgot how many
principles.
years I've been a priest. Is it 42 or 43?
Oh, I have to go back and look. You know, it'd be good to ask Mary Ann.
You get to that, like your age. She's like, am I this old or this old?
Yeah, I just asked my wife. She tells me all.
But we've been here for a long time, and I've been here for 23 years as
Yeah.
pastor. So
I'm always cognizant of when we talk about ourselves, don't want to come across as like, hey, look, we're doing stuff so great. It really is like so much trial and error to try to figure out what's going to work for our community.
mhm.
And I think what's important when we're sharing this stuff is the principles are what's important.
Mhm.
Right,
Hospitality, outrageous hospitality,
Right.
really important.
and you really have to.
Creating spaces of welcome, really important. How can you do that wherever you go, wherever you are,
Exactly.
within the means that the Holy Spirit's given you? Because the Holy Spirit's in control of your community. You're
I
just there as a shepherd,
I don't think any church.
whether you're a pastor or a layperson or whatever
Right.
it is.
I don't think any church should be filthy. I mean, like we have volunteers that come in every week, the angel dusters, and they
Right.
clean the church. And both of our churches are cleaned by parishioners. I can remember this past summer being at a wedding and in another church, and even the pulpit had dust so thick I could write my name into it. It was just in the corners there were like little balls of fuzz that had over the years just built up.
Right.
What would you say, Father, to like the leadership teams, the pastoral councils, the pastors, whoever's in leadership in parishes like that? I'm sure they've got 101 things that they've got to think about. And, you know, good things, bad things, they're sent out fires. You know what it takes to lead a parish.
Right.
And it's like, I don't have the bandwidth to think about
Well, I think
doing some of the
I
things
think
that
a
we're
lot of
talking
guys
about.
just don't think because they think it's up to them. I think you have to delegate this stuff out. I mean, it's important for you to know that this stuff is important and it makes a difference. You yourself may not be able to have the time
Right,
to focus on these things. You give it to somebody else to focus on these things.
right.
Or you see something and you have a chain of command that you can say, this needs to be done.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that I do every week is meet with the maintenance team to make sure that the things that need to be taken care of are taken care of. It's, what is a 30-minute meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Priest can do that.
Right.
I'm not actually on my hands and knees cleaning the floors, but I'm making sure that those things get done.
Right.
So it's important then, again, going back to the principles, what's important,
Right,
and realizing that no one person has to be in charge of it. You can
right,
always delegate and equip people to do it.
right.
What's really cool in that is, again, if you mentioned playing to people's strengths, we were going through our spiritual staff just last week or the week before, and we were reviewing the APEST,
Right.
which if
Assessment.
people haven't gone through APEST, really great assessment. We'll do an episode on APEST. But part of APEST is there was a reflection that we did from St. Paul. And St. Paul talks about we're each given gifts unique to ourselves that manifest the Holy Spirit for the purpose of the building up of the kingdom. So our gifts aren't for ourselves, they're for others.
Right.
So when you accept the principle, like when you see it as valid and important, then you delegate it to somebody whose gifts can manifest it, can make it happen. Then they actually come alive. And if you just give them a little room to be creative, they'll do things you never thought of doing.
We talked about that. You
Right?
and I had a conversation the other day about like some people might be able to, like, I could sense if you're in a bad mood right away, but I might not see the dust and the things that Father's talking about because I'm more focused on.
We play tricks on Chris. Like we move stuff around on her desk and we wait to see how
I don't
long.
even notice. Where somebody else would immediately
I
notice.
challenge you to do that, Father Declan.
Yeah.
He would
He'll
immediately
know.
notice.
He'll know.
Yeah. But so knowing those strengths and weaknesses about yourself, like I'm probably not the person you're going to send out to look at the church, and like what needs to be done. And so if you're a pastor like that, that's more relational, then you probably need to find somebody, either whether it be on staff or a volunteer who could go out and look at the church and go, yeah, that needs to be done.
Yeah.
I think that is, again, one of the principles. It's not about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that is this, I think that a lot of my brother priests are feeling overwhelmed with their job as pastoring of parishes. There's a lot of problems. There's financial problems. There's personnel problems. There's physical problems.
Right.
Many of them have multiple
Yeah.
buildings,
Multiple
multiple
hats and
churches
multiple,
that they're overseeing now.
Even St. Mary's found out they're closing down. They're going to have to move their services out of the church because of structural problems.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's going to take probably months and months before that gets repaired.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to have to move their mass to the hall. So those things can feel like, how in the world can I do this? And that sense of overwhelming itself is a type of burden that you can't seem to lift out of. But if you realize it's not about you, and you realize that there are people there that are willing to do it, now, will it be done the way you want it, how you done it, when you want it? No.
Right.
Because everyone is different, right?
Yeah.
But will it get done? And like you say, many times, like, you know, my whole feeling with staff and everything, I have this philosophy that I must win, right?
Right.
I must win. So this is how I put myself in this mental frame. I don't think your idea is a good one, but go ahead and do it. Because if you do it and you succeed, it benefits the parish. I win. If you do it and it fails, I can say, I told you so, and I win.
Okay. And it's my job
Everybody loves that philosophy.
to have you keep the I told you so to yourself. Like, you can have it. Just don't share with anybody.
Old dogs, no tricks.
So I think what's really important in that case, like, again, because you're right, priests are going through so much, and a lot of them don't have maybe the staffs or the teams developed yet. What we found really helpful is coaching.
Yes.
Like having a coach. So I mentioned you're doing a book with Ron Huntley. Ron Huntley's been our parish coach for the last 4 years. Having a coach, somebody who can get to know you, your team, your community, and who can come in periodically and just lend an objective voice. Because you're in the thick of it, right?
Right,
You're
right.
right in
You
the
get
height of
stuck.
ministry.
Yeah, and
really stuck with problems, right?
Sure.
And an outside person comes in and says, well, why don't you look at it this way? And we all
And you're
like,
like,
look
oh
at
my
each other.
gosh.
Wow, you're brilliant. We never thought of that.
Yeah.
But it was a simple little shift, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
And
it
that's
could be
all it
somebody,
takes.
maybe if parishes can't pay for a coach, there's certainly business people within every parish that could come in and lend
Or
an
even
objective.
if
Or from another
no,
parish.
this is probably very difficult, but if priests would gather together, 2 or 3 parishes could afford
That's true too.
to hire somebody to come in and do that.
That's some of that outside the box thinking,
Right.
Mhm.
right? Reaching out to brother priests that you're friends with and saying, hey, this is an opportunity. Why don't we go into it together?
Right.
That's
yeah,
a great
that's
idea.
a great idea.
Or even reaching out to just other parishes who are maybe going through the same things you're going through. I mean, we've had parishes reach out to us. We've had parishes come out to visit. We've gone to other parishes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, how can we learn from each other?
Right. And we really need to start doing that as a church more. We need to
Really.
be working together, parish to parish, parish to
Mm-hmm.
diocese.
We can no longer, the parochialism that has defined the Catholic Church in the last 200 years really needs to dissipate
Mhm.
because we're facing a new reality. The
Right.
culture is not supporting us. Our numbers are down. We don't have the resources that we might have had in the past. Our expenses are astronomically high.
Yeah.
We really need to start thinking in terms of how we can learn from each other and support one another.
I just met with the diocesan HR person this morning, and we talked about that very thing. She had a pastor who called, and they needed a communications person, but they're like, I can't really afford somebody full time. I don't know if I'll find somebody part time. And she's like, well, why don't you try to partner maybe with another parish where you could both split the salary? And, you know, and as she's saying it, she's thinking he's probably not going to want to do that. But it's like, those are the types of things, if we could do that and work together and, like you said, have it be a
Foster
win
that
for both.
collaboration.
Yeah, for both parishes.
Again, because like on that little humorous thing about the mindset, we have to take ourselves out of that mindset in a certain sense and put ourselves into what's really winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
What is ultimately, I am successful when people that I am entrusted with find a relationship with Jesus Christ. So it doesn't matter if I find a way to do that by leaning on a brother priest or a different parish or working with different parish. I don't need to get the credit because my success is these people have found the Lord Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes.
So that's
the
a
mindset.
disciple shift that has to happen.
Right.
Thanks for bringing that.
Okay.
That was great.
Really good. Yeah.
One thing I'm guilty of, maybe we could just talk about this a little bit. How can we?
You're guilty?
I'm guilty of a lot of things. This is one in particular. I like sitting at the end of the pew. Like, it just makes me feel comfortable. I've got the kids, so maybe that's a little.
You are tall. You have long legs.
I am taller. I stretch out. But what would you say to that? How do we, as members of the parish, what should our mindset be when we come and we find our place?
Well, first let's look
worship?
at some of the obstacles to that. One, COVID has freaked people out, and I've noticed that since COVID, there's a lot of people still that want to sit spaced from, not close to.
Mm-hmm.
You got to recognize that as a legitimate and valid concern.
Right. They don't want to shake hands at the handshake of peace, et cetera.
That still hasn't really been normal yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So those are things that, we just have to take time and work our way through. There are reasons that some medical reasons, for example, that people feel they have to sit on the edge of the pew. There are a lot of people who are experiencing anxiety issues and have panic attacks, and they need to quell that fear of that they're going into a panic attack. They need to have a quick exit in case that happens. They don't want to be walking over people and so forth and so on. So in my mind, I've been debating all this. It's not that you like to hug the pew because you're a large guy and it's more comfortable physically to do that, and you're probably very used to that. And when you worship, you want to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's when somebody comes, you stand up and get out of the pew and let them walk into the pew.
You mean not do the knees on the side?
Because that's not a welcoming. Nobody wants to trip over your knees or your feet, and it's just awkward. So please stand. Let me. Your comfort is just as important as my comfort. Let me get up, step out, let them go into the pew.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a valid reason for sitting on the edge of the pew, then so be it. But know that there's a responsibility. Like you go on a plane and you sit in that special seat, you got responsibilities.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we have to. I've been playing with this in my mind, how to present it. That if you're going to be on the edge of the pew, then no, you have a unique responsibility to make sure anyone that comes to that pew feels welcome, which means you got to get off your butt and stand out in the aisle so they can get in.
Yeah. But it's even more than that, because you've talked about, Father, somebody who sits there like that with their arms crossed,
That's
throughout Mass.
Yeah.
Right. So that gets into almost another topic, and how you've kind of tried to present that to parishioners about that this Mass is a community celebration, it's a community prayer.
Mm-hmm.
The Vatican II document on the liturgy says that we are to be full and active participants. It's very hard for me to appreciate full and active participation with your arms crossed and your mouth shut.
Mm.
We have raised generations of passive spectators, club members, and not disciples. We're here to worship. You can't worship solely in your head. I'm not saying that in your heart you're not feeling something, but there's typically, when one feels something, it's expressed externally.
Mm-hmm.
I like to use the image of, you go to a birthday party and the cake comes out and the candles are on and it's time to sing happy birthday, and you sit back and you're not singing.
Right. It's not a celebration.
If there are 10 people there and 7 people aren't singing, it's kind of awkward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be a very bad birthday party.
The work of the people also is in the liturgy. So just as the presider has parts, so the people, that's why I'm very reluctant. For example, I never say the amen because that's the part for the people to say. The dialogue at the preface, that is for the people to say.
Yeah.
The amens, that's for the people to say. Even the prayers, you can lead them, but I don't want to replace their participation in that. And so the other, on a very practical level on this, is this reality is most of the people who are old enough to have adult children, the kids aren't going to church anymore.
Yeah.
their grandchildren haven't even been baptized.
That's such a common thing.
It's so
It's such a
common.
pain. It's such
There's
a
a
hurt for people.
52% of Roman Catholics who've been baptized no longer worship, no longer go to a Catholic church. Many of them have gone to the evangelical churches. And so
Why do you think that is?
I think there's one, they feel connected, and two, they've been put in contact with that relationship. They've had an encounter with Christ through that experience of being welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more lively. It's more the preaching. I mean, Catholic priests are notorious for not being great preachers. I mean, it just doesn't have the oomph.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Go ahead.
They feel that connection with Jesus, but we have the Eucharist.
Yes.
What more intimate of a connection can you have?
Yeah. Because my theory is this, that in the past, people accepted faith on belief. It was a assent of the will or the mind. They may have felt something, but that wasn't the primary thing.
Right.
Today, we have to face this cultural reality. I'm not endorsing it. I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I'm just saying this is the way it is. And you have to face reality for where it's at, not what you want it to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So where it's at right now is if they don't feel it, they don't believe it.
Mm.
And so people are looking for that emotional connection to have that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
To talk, you can know this. We learned this lesson here. We have this wonderful thing called the Catechism Bowl for our school in RE.
Yeah.
And these kids know their catechism. It would blow your mind to see all the catechism they know.
Right. Right.
So they can say, oh, one question was, what are the Vatican II documents? And the kid responded, do you want it in English or in Latin? I mean, it's wow for an eighth grader to be able to, first of all, even know Vatican II, let alone name all the documents and then be able to do it in Latin.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like amazing, okay? But it wasn't making a difference in their lives. They were still being naughty in various places. They still stopped going to church.
Yeah.
And so we realized that for us to keep people in the pews, they were going to have to start to feel something.
Right.
And we get a lot of Christian, we're too Protestant, which is, well, look, there's nothing that we're doing that is not magisterial.
Yeah.
It's all the side stuff. It's all the style things. That's what's happening. But my theory was years ago that if we could get some of the energy from the evangelical churches and put it in the context of the Eucharist,
Yeah.
and the sacraments and the traditions of the church. So what we're finding is people go through Alpha and now they're going through the Rescue Project and we're taking people from that club membership to the believer to the disciple. As our disciples are growing in number, they're all of a sudden open and hungry to know more about the church, to understand the traditions and experience some of those things. Our Divine Mercy Sunday, the church was packed. We heard confessions for 5 hours.
Right.
And that was multiple priests. I mean, so it's showing
yeah.
our Eucharistic Adoration Chapel, people there before the Blessed Sacrament 24/7.
Yeah.
This doesn't happen unless there's a connection, unless this encounter with Christ has taken place. And we've emphasized in our church, especially now we just finished this project, which was a vision of mine for many years, that when we get to the Eucharistic prayer, the lights in the church dim and the light on the altar becomes really bright, emphasizing this is what we're here for.
So as the guy who was in charge of, along with our media team, with executing that vision, even myself, I was like, are we getting a little too theatrical? Does it feel like a production? Does it, because you want to be careful. The church does this beautiful thing where it lays the boundaries for us. Like, this is where within this space you operate.
Right.
Within this space you can be creative.
Right.
Just don't cross these lines. And that's the beautiful thing that the church does. And so if we can exercise that creativity, okay, great. Let's put these lights in. But let's be careful not to turn into a production.
Right.
But when we put the lights in, what I heard from people was that it helped them focus on the Eucharist.
Exactly.
It was like the response was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, so for those who don't know, and if you're able to join us, please join us on a Sunday to experience this, or on a Saturday. But we dim the lights of the house, and then we elevate lights that are focused on the altar.
Right.
And that light gradually increases towards the elevation right, of Jesus's body and blood. And it's in that moment that you find yourself going back to like even the beautification of our grounds. Subconsciously, you're just gradually being drawn,
pulled
into the altar, and everything else fades away.
Right.
And just those, again, small intentional things that you can do in your community to accent that.
By the time we get to the elevation, that light is so bright,
Yeah.
as it should be. I mean, it's so in the Middle Ages, they use incense, they use candles, they use stained glass.
They would use bells, like
They use
the
bells.
elevation's coming, they ring the bells.
So, that's all become part of our tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a modern age where we have technology. We can do a lot more and still be within the bounds. I don't ever want to get hokey.
Yeah.
I don't want to but the things that, and people will correct you on that.
Mm-hmm.
When you do something that...
Yeah, we went a little too far. All right, let's pull back.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right, yeah.
That's the thing is that a lot of places, a lot of priests specifically are afraid to take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't try it, you'll never know it. And you don't know it until you know it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be willing to fail.
Right.
Oh God, the history of St. John the Evangelist in terms of the last 15 years has been nothing but a story of one failure after another failure after another failure, where we have learned lessons along the way that have elevated our experience. And so when you look out at a church today and it is jam-packed, as our 10 o'clock Mass is, I think some of those Masses are 1,400 people in a church that's built for 1,200.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that and you see the difference in the impact, it's like I said the other day to somebody, 18 years ago, this was an active parish. We had over 100 ministries. I was proud of that. The staff was eating each other up. We were bumping into each other. We were constantly, there was battles and fights. We were wearing ourselves thin. Yeah. And one day I just realized, what difference is this making? We had a consumer mentality. We had this idea that we were a club and people were unhappy if they weren't getting the service that they felt they deserved. But there was nobody coming to the Lord.
Yeah.
We didn't have stories of impact. Like, this has made such a difference in my life.
Right.
I mean, we always hear preaching, well, this was good, or the music, this was good. But it really wasn't driving us. And now, week after week after week, what do we hear? One person after another person telling us, when I came to this parish, my whole life changed. I've been a Catholic my whole life, and I've been going to church, and not until I joined here that this has been happening. And this is what we're trying to say while we're doing this podcast, writing the book, doing all the things, DiscipleSHIFT, is this is available to any parish in the country, in the world.
And not everybody will like it. You have to be prepared, I think, to know some people are not going to like it and they may go somewhere else. But for every one of those people, there's 10 that are telling you about an impact, how impacted that they are.
Well, here's one way where we failed is whenever you try to copy paste whatever has worked for another community, most of the time it fails here.
Right.
But when we discern what the principle is, and if that principle makes sense to us and where we are in the life of our community, try to apply it the way that works for us. And that's where that wrestling comes in, right? Like Edison's thing. I know I've learned 1,000 ways on how to not make a light bulb, right? So you learn 1,000 ways on how to not do alpha or how to not be a greeter or how to not. Right. But if you keep trying at it, you get it right. And then you build,
exactly.
You build on from there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's a process. I mean, I wouldn't take it. I would say that we tried something that didn't work that well, but some parts worked. So let's focus on what worked and what didn't work, and then let's try to tweak it. And so after 2 or 3 years, now we got a product that is mostly working, but it still needs improvement. So what do we do? So it's an ongoing analysis, how we can incorporate these different ideas into this particular community. But again, it's principles. It's the concepts that of how you go about and what you do is thinking. It's not so much do this X, Y, and Z, because it won't work in your parish.
Yeah.
And it won't work if we take it from somebody else's parish.
It'd be nice if there was a formula that you can just plug in wherever you are, or a general blueprint.
Yeah.
But that's not the case.
And
We're
every
all
parish
unique.
is so different.
Yeah.
Some
Every
are
parish
very
is
small
different.
rural parishes, and then you have one in a bigger area.
That's the thing
like
is like when we give, if I've been out to give talks or missions or whatever, and we talk about all these things, a lot of rural parishes come and say, I don't have the resources. I have a part-time secretary. And
right.
well, my experience at St. Joan of Arc, my previous parish, was run entirely by volunteers. I mean, you have to foster that kind of mentality. So I don't think the size of your parish or location of your parish is prohibiting you from accepting principles that work.
And building leaders. I don't know if you want to get into that, but that's one thing that
we
we're
were
really
supposed
working
to
on.
tackle 3 topics in this episode,
we got way
but
off
we
track.
scratched the surface just on the first one.
Yeah.
So this is great. Now we have more episodes, so stay tuned. We were going to talk about mass participation. So we have a mass participation policy here.
Yeah.
And we wanted to talk about engagement.
Maybe you should give a little tickler, like a little...
Let's just leave it at that. So
you don't want to whet their
Yeah.
appetite with what that
I think that's enough. They know we're going to talk about our mass attendance policy. Hopefully that's enough. But before we wrap up this episode, from your perspective, Chris, because you're the one that brought it up, which I think ties beautifully in with welcome, something new that we started doing is Father Maletta or Father Declan, before the start of Mass, after they've come down to the altar, they say a word of welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So from your experience, personally, and things that you've heard, what's that been like?
I think it's been great. I mean, I know one time our principal talked about, I think Katie has given this story where she brought somebody who hadn't been to church in a long time. And she said she could tell that person, like right away when they got in the pew, felt kind of uncomfortable, like everybody's kneeling and praying, like, what should I do? Kind of, and she said then when Father got up to the altar and welcomed people who hadn't been to church in quite a while, just kind of follow along on the screens with when you kneel or stand, you'll be fine. She said she visibly felt, her friend just relax. Like, okay, it's okay. They accept people who may not know exactly what they're supposed to do at every part, because we do stand and sit and kneel a lot. And then just the people in the pews, they really do embrace when you say to turn and greet people and, look for a prayer partner. It's not, you don't see people, at least not in my experience, just standing there not engaging. Everybody is looking for who they can greet and, what can I pray for you on? That type of thing. So it's really neat to see.
And that was something that we weren't doing 2 years ago.
Right.
But it was our parish coach helped us come to the realization, and a very simple one.
Right.
You're assuming that everyone here is Catholic.
We did the
knows how to worship with
We did
Catholics.
the meet and greet for years, but we didn't add the prayer partner
That's
piece
right.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
Or we didn't do the
welcome part.
Right. And specifically welcoming people who hadn't been to church in a while or people who may not be Catholic.
Right.
So another neat thing we were doing before COVID was you were encouraging people during the Our Father to join hands across the aisles and all that. And that was pretty cool too. Or for the handshake of peace to go outside of your aisle. And
that's St. Mary's, where Bishop Melzick was before he passed. And when he had his stroke, I went out there and helped a couple times. And I noticed in that community, that's what they did. And we were also exposed to St. Monica's, and we saw some of the things that they did. And so we brought some of those things back to our parish.
Right.
And that's a perfect example of how we learned things from other parishes that were much smaller and much less resources, but they had great ideas.
You and I were even talking about when my family went to Michigan this weekend, and I was sharing with you how they were doing the little context piece before the readings, and you were like, we used to do that. That would be a good idea.
Commentator. They're still using
that's right,
commentators.
Yeah. So
we
just
tried
little
that during
things
Lent.
like that.
We brought that in seasonally here.
Right. Yeah.
What is it, so we can, for people who are watching, listening, giving some practical tips? What do you say, Father, during that welcome? Like, because you can actually watch one of our live streams.
I want to welcome everybody here, especially if you haven't been in church for a while, or if you're not Catholic. I just want you to know that it's an honor for us to share our worship experience with you.
And it's simple as that.
Simple.
Yeah.
Great.
Any closing thoughts on welcome? Again, we're gonna circle back to.
I think it's one of the easiest first steps that a parish could take. to just really look at that, whether it be the facilities, whether it be just really having a robust greeting program in place, doing training, doing formation with greeters. Super easy. I mean, when we start talking about something like an alpha program, yes, that involves armies of people, and that's a much more complicated next step maybe. But I mean, this is, I think, just a very nice entry level, that can make a big change in your parish, but it's not something that's going to cost necessarily a lot of resources or a lot of time.
I can tell you that implementing these principles that we've put in place has changed the community in this sense that we have around 5 new families joining the parish a week. Our collections have gone from when I came here, $7,000 a week, to now hovering around $50,000 a week. From struggling to find people to do different things as volunteers to now nearly 500 people a week volunteering in the parish. From no impact per se to almost common now to hear people want to tell the story of how they've encountered Christ in the context of St. John the Evangelist. These principles really do work. And they make your life as a priest so much easier if you would employ these principles.
The hard part for someone employing them is figuring out how to make it work for you.
Right.
The awesome thing is through them, you let the Holy Spirit, again, you're creating the space for the Holy Spirit to encounter people.
Right.
And that's what changes hearts and gets people on fire.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's all about the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
That's for sure.
Well, thanks for coming on. We're going to have Louis on to talk in specific about greeters. So a lot of the things that we talked about today, we'll have the actual ministry coordinators come on and really get in the weeds on these are the strategies we employ. This is what hasn't
We're just
worked.
the brains behind all that.
Yeah, you guys
you're
here to present the vision.
Right here.
Yeah.
I don't think
The brain
ever,
trust.
I don't think anyone's ever included me in a brain trust.
Thanks for tuning in to DiscipleSHIFT. You can find us at sjeplus.org and on YouTube, SJE+. And as always, like, share, subscribe. If this was helpful, share it with a colleague, a team member, someone you think will benefit from this conversation. Take care. God bless.